Hi, are you Maud?
Yes. Dear God, it takes nothing special to mop up after the decrepit and the dying. Can you feel that?
Yep, yeah.
But to save a soul, that's quite something. Bless Amanda's body, and bless her mind, which is shrouded in darkness.
When you pray, do you get a response?
It's like he's physically in me. It's how he guides me. He's just there. He's everywhere.
Maud is looking out for me, you see. To save my soul, if I understand correctly. You must be the loneliest girl I've ever seen. I just want to see you loosen up.
I've got more important things on my mind.
Maud, he isn't real.
This is life and death on another level.
Oh, yes, of course.
Never waste your pain. Never waste your pain.
You're watching BFI At Home with me, Alice Lowe. I'm a director and an actor, and Rose Glass, who is the director of St Maud, which is still in cinemas. Is it still in cinemas? Yeah, it's still in cinemas, and it is a brilliant watch. And we're chatting to each other. I think it's interesting. We've both chosen to be in our bedrooms.
Yeah, I don't have. They've got flatmates wandering around everywhere else, so I sort of thought there was the least chance of like a random person in their pants or a cat going past behind.
I've got the same. They're called children though. But they are flatmates, and they have to be shut out. That I have to give a strong signal, otherwise they will get involved.
They could just kind of, maybe you could give them a secret signal if things aren't going well or you need an interruption, and just
spice things up. Come in and do a dance, some kind of interaction. You could do that with your flatmates. You could say, "Come in the pants."
Maybe later.
You should have just set that up to happen as a surprise Halloween event.
Rob Savage, the guy who directed Host recently, I saw he did that horror film, the Zoom horror film. He did all these kind of like interviews and news appearances, and one of them he like actually rigged like a cupboard or something to creepily open like live on the morning news.
He's just too clever. He's just too clever by half. I did a short film with him, and I'm really pleased that his film. Have you seen Host?
Yeah.
It's great, isn't it?
A while ago. Yeah, it's mad. I was like, how did you do all of that in lockdown? He said like this, managed to find like there's all these sort of stunt coordinators and VFX people stuck at home with nothing to do.
It's really clever idea, and why not? Like, I wish I'd done it, but I just didn't. How's your lockdown been?
Yeah, all right, to be honest. I mean, it was weird at first because it was just when it happened was right when St Maud was originally going to be released. So we were like 2 days away from being with stuff to LA to do all this sort of swanky tour stuff, and then then that all happened. But to be honest, apart from Maud stuff, I kind of just wanted to get on with writing for a bit anyway, which sort of suits hermit life. So lockdown wasn't too big a difference in many ways.
Yeah, I don't think anyone really tells you about that when you do an independent film, how much press you're going to have to do. I don't want to complain about it. It's a lovely thing when your film does well enough for people to be interested in, but it actually, when you are a filmmaker and you want to be getting on with the next film, it's a huge chunk of your life. You quite underestimate how much time you have to devote.
I've not really thought much further ahead than like getting a film made. So then all the sort of stuff that's come after it now is a bit like, oh shit. Although this time around, I think because it's been such a delay now until Maud came out, it's been sort of nice and a bit of a relief to get it out. So I've been quite happy to sort of ramble on about it, although it's dying. Anyway, but at the beginning, when we were originally meant to go out, I was absolutely terrified. I think we'd just done a first sort of dollop of some of that kind of press stuff during the festivals. And I can speak in full sentences now, sort of.
So you were shy when you were first doing the prep?
Yeah, and but sort of nervous talker, which I sort of still have a bit. But there's like a couple of interviews with me, I think, from like the night that we did the premiere in Toronto, and I don't think I'm making much sense at all. I'm just kind of going, oh, and we kind of, yeah, it's great.
It's so funny. I mean, I had to have press training when I did Sightseers, because that was my first thing where I actually had to go on a proper sort of junket, and I was so nervous. And after we did the press training, we had to have a report, and the lady said, "You're acting like you're a lottery winner when actually you did the work. You actually, you worked and had some talent to make this happen. You're not just luck." But it was like this weird sort of like, oh, why me? Oh, it's a big leap to kind of suddenly be presenting your work, isn't it? Like,
what, she only told you that after you'd done all of the press stuff? And it's like,
it was after we'd done the training. It was like they kind of give you a little, it's a weird thing, like press training. This is probably not that interesting to a BFI audience. Maybe we should get on to actually talking about the film.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think I loved the film, obviously. But it's interesting you're talking about, I'm a nervous talker. What I really admired about the film, amongst many things, was how sparing it is and how disciplined it is. Was that a process that came with the script, or was it a process that came with the edit? For me, the reason that's interesting is because I'm such a maximalist, and I find it really hard to boil stuff down to their, intense component parts.
No, same. Like, I'm sort of surprised as anyone that sort of discipline and tightness seem to be sort of things that people describe the film with. I think it mostly came out of sort of fear and necessity. Like, Prevenge is the same, like super tight. Like, I think the script initially, I was terrified of being in a situation that I've been in on a lot of shorts, where you've got a script that's too long and you're rushing madly from location to location to just try and like get the scene, and you sort of, maybe you have to cover it in one setup and you sort of lose all this nuance. So I sort of knew that I didn't think it would work if we weren't able to kind of, shape each scene and draw out tension and stuff. So I worked pretty hard at getting it down to what I thought was 90 pages. But then it turned out I'd actually been formatting the script wrong. So just before we shot the film, we sort of put it into Final Draft, the sort of proper software, because I've been doing it in a free one, and it's shrunk by like 8 pages.
Oh, that's really interesting. I had a producer say to me that your first feature should be 75 to 80 pages long. And he said exactly what you said, actually, which is you want to feel the breathing space to just try out some stuff and really enjoy certain moments. And when you're on a tight budget, you don't want to be rushing that stuff to lower the quality of all the scenes. Then, like, you don't have the kind of you can't indulge in anything, basically.
Totally. And I mean like, you're kind of, and filming stuff is also ridiculous and time consuming, and I don't know, there's so much that goes into all of it. I sort of, and also with it being a first film, I don't know, maybe you're also terrified of people being like bored for a moment, so you're just kind of trying to make every moment like, keep watching it. But then obviously in the edit it got a lot tighter as well, although not that we cut stuff out or anything. I think we pretty much used everything we shot, but me and Mark Towns, the editor, just were fairly strict about it. But it was nice because it ended up being sort of kind of accidentally much shorter than we thought, and we'd been kind of good kids and not used our contingency and stuff. It meant that during the edit I was able to just sort of keep writing scenes and adding stuff, which was quite nice.
You can put stuff back in. It's nice in the edit, isn't it, where you boil it down so much that you think, I could actually start putting some stuff back in now, and that's quite exciting. And depending on how you've shot, if you've got those mood moments, that's what I always think of it. It's those purely visual thinking moments that you can then put back in.
Yeah, totally. A lot of the pickups, we did like 4 days extra shooting days, I guess, kind of halfway through the edit, and a lot of that was just like little moments of like Maud by herself in her bedroom, and small beats like that, and also a couple of quite major scenes which I then sort of wrote in response to what we'd already shot. But it was nice to be able to work like that, because it's stuff that I wouldn't have come up with before, because things like the bit where the Beetle speaks Welsh, that was all kind of written during the edit, and only because
Wow.
it happens to be Welsh. So I'd sort of heard her speaking Welsh to her sister on the phone. I was like, it's such a beautiful language.
Now, Reece Shearsmith from League of Gentlemen messaged me to say, ask Rose about the voice and how you found the voice of God in the film, because he found it very creepy.
Very glad to hear. Thanks. It's more of it. So it's her voice just kind of pitched down a bit. And yeah, it sort of came from necessity, because originally in the script, I think whatever scene had come before it, we were then kind of going to go straight to her kind of going to Amanda's house for the big sort of final showdown. But it felt like a bit too much of a leap.
Yeah.
And it sort of felt like she needed a moment, sort of questioning her faith one more time, a moment of doubt, and God kind of like giving her the final unequivocal go ahead. So I think I texted Mark, our editor, like in the middle of the night, being like, we need to hear God speak. It's going to be a Beatle.
I love it. I love it because it does feel different to the rest of the film, actually, but in a way that is really important, because it does feel like, oh, this is new. This is going to tip her into something else. And it's really interesting, actually, because we had a similar journey with the baby's voice in Prevenge. I mean, initially when I came up with the idea, I didn't have a baby's voice in it at all. It sort of was something that came to me, that we needed another character, like a kind of antagonist.
Yeah.
And then that gradually became this talking baby who's, you know, driving her, urging her to kill. But we went through lots of different changes of who the voice was going to be. Like, were we going to ask someone to do it? And eventually I was doing, it's me. So it's the same. But, you know, it's cheap that way, isn't it? So, you know,
voice in your head, so it fits with the
exactly. It's satisfyingly circular, isn't it? So you sort of go, oh, that works, that makes sense.
That's weird, because initially in like the first, before I wrote the script of Maud, but just like as a treatment for ages, it was going to be a two-hander between Maud and God, and it was going to be like God was a character, and you were going to hear his voice like a lot, sort of like what you ended up doing with the baby, and we sort of went the other way. But then missed it. It was like, we do need to hear him at least once.
So I mean, I'd love to talk to you about where the idea sort of originally came from and everything, because the impact that it had on me, I mean, so, you know, to look at the poster, you could think, okay, it's another exorcist film, it's another possession film. But the twist on that of the person that she's possessed with, this girl, is God rather than the devil. It's just so clever and brilliant. And just, can you talk about that and how you got to that place with the film?
Yes, I'm still really bad at answering this in any kind of interesting or satisfying way, other than I guess it's just sort of a weird amalgamation of stuff I was interested in. But it started off initially wanting to do a film which was a two-hander, but with two-hander between a woman and a voice in her head, and quite quickly that voice became God. But I didn't at first really think too much about. It didn't occur to me immediately whether to define whether or not it sort of actually was God, or whether she's kind of experiencing psychosis or something. I can't remember. So that was sort of the initial thing. And then it just kind of like shifted around quite a lot. And the voice thing sort of started to become a bit distracting from her after a while, because there was too much of it. And I guess I don't know. I think I find film exciting because of the ability to kind of put yourself in someone else's head in a way that you don't really get to experience ever, really. So I'm waffling now. I don't know. So yeah, I mean, I guess the idea of having, like, on the surface, what could be quite a sort of mundane or bleak story, or kind of somebody going through seemingly sort of unremarkable stuff. You know, she's caring for this woman, she kind of lives in this shitty flat, like everything, but sort of within her experience of it, she's in, and us as an audience, there's this sort of biblical level, high stakes sort of mission going on with her. And I find that sort of juxtaposition, just sort of themes and styles, I guess I find that sort of satisfying and potentially funny and potentially very sad.
And it is funny in places. I mean, that's what's brilliant about it, is that there is that kind of there is that many different tones to it as a film. It's not a pure sort of like which was really refreshing and lovely. But I think also what it probably has in in common with some of the films that I've done is once upon a time, you know, a character like Maud would be the baddie. She would be completely the antagonist, you know, like I think about just Hand the Box the Cradle or something like that, where, you know, it's a crazy woman, what a bitch, like this. And I think what I'm interested in, you're interested in, what you were just talking about is, you know, the difference with this is you are inside her head, you know, as an audience, you're being let into her perspective. So whatever she's doing, even though she's the baddie, I mean, she does, you know, spoiler alert, she does kill someone. Even though she's the baddie, she doesn't think she's the baddie.
We're all sort of the heroes of our own stories, and people don't tend to cast themselves as the antagonist. Like we all kind of, probably most of us think we're all doing good. So it's just, I think it's kind of interesting. It's fun as an audience member. I find it fun empathizing with characters doing sort of awful things.
Yeah, me too. Why is that? What's that all about?
I was rewatching Prevenge actually today, and I was just like, oh, there's actually quite a lot of sort of crossovers and stuff.
Yeah, I think probably there is. I mean, I think it's that thing of empathizing with people doing bad things, and maybe women doing bad things specifically because women do get punished so often for transgressions on screen. And I mean, did you ever feel tempted to give Maud a happy ending?
No, which is all. Did I? No, not really. Maybe the ending was pretty much that for a long time. That was sort of one of the things that sort of worked out. A lot of it was kind of working out how she got there. Considering the sort of the story that's kind of come before it and everything, felt like, I mean, I don't know what, with the other nurse coming in to her. I'm assuming people listening to this have seen it. But when the other nurse comes to her place, I was kind of thinking maybe in some other films that might be the sort of
redemption.
Yes, exactly. Kind of like, what's that word?
Well, I mean, I suppose I'm asking this: did she have a happy ending? I mean, maybe she did. I mean, if God's real, and you know, you've given us both of those options in a way.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it was sort of she gets what she wants in her sort of God narrative. And experience what's going on, she's achieved whatever mission she thinks she set out to do. I did actually, no, I tell a lie, it was never, I don't think we ever seriously thought about doing it, but at one point I was imagining, what if the film, you have the scene, it ends as it does now, sort of she's burning, cut to black, and then maybe she sort of opens her eyes in hospital with like a handsome doctor leaning over her. She's like, savior or something, but
she's gone to heaven. So it's really interesting to see a film that's got Christianity, lots of themes of Christianity, because it's kind of something you don't see that much anymore. I actually read something about, you know, this is just me casually reading about different mental illnesses, which I do on a day-to-day basis. Apparently people don't think they're God as much as they used to. You know, like in the past, with psychoses and stuff, people used to be like, I'm Jesus, and now they're more likely to be like, I'm Madonna or something, you know, not even Madonna, that's making it religious again. I'm Katy Perry or something, you know, like they it's more about fame and stuff now, which is really interesting, what our preoccupations are and what lies in our subconscious, I suppose.
No, true, but I think even probably in the olden days or ages ago, when you're talking about people having religious psychosis, it's still a kind of a version of celebrity, like in a weird kind of, it's, I mean, like Maud said it a few times before, that she sort of sees Maud as like a very sort of millennial character in that, and that weirdly her relationship with God is sort of similar to what some people have now with like social media. But this even if now we don't frame it as religion, the idea of sort of feeling somehow accountable to some sort of audience or someone that's watching you, and the sort of need for approval from outsiders and need for sort of validation is still probably tapping into the same kind of human urge, but just and I guess I guess that makes sense, doesn't it? If everybody is a society already kind of accepts fairly sort of religious way of living, then it's not too much of a leap. But apparently, sorry to interrupt you a bit. I've said this in like a few interviews, but I always find it quite interesting in that apparently Joan of Arc, like some psychologists now believe that maybe she had this particular kind of epilepsy, And the reason she was able to sort of commune with God was because it was these kind of ecstatic seizures, which are preceded by really intense hallucinations and kind of hearing things. And apparently, like, even in sort of the original writings, it says that, like, whenever she would commune with God, she'd kind of fall to the floor in an ecstasy and kind of hear bells and all this kind of stuff. So I guess the sort of thing of, like, is somebody undergoing a religious experience, or is it this specific neurological thing? I guess what both of us find kind of interesting is that the experience for the individual undergoing it is still exactly the same, I guess, regardless of how you anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think that's all really fascinating, all of the stuff about Joan of Arc, and also in that way that, you know, in the past that was powerful enough, those kind of, whether it was mental illness or epilepsy or whatever, it was powerful enough for women to seize attention and power and control.
Well, totally. It's like if Maud or someone had existed in the same time, then probably people might have believed her, and it would have, what she was doing would be celebrated. And it's all very, you know.
Yeah, it's a strange thing. It's funny because I almost, you know, obviously Morveth has her amazing take on it, but I sort of saw her as being very much out of time, like she was sort of someone who'd rejected being a millennial in order to be this strangely, you know, anachronistic person, like she'd rejected modern society or something.
I kind of think both are true. She sort of has rejected all of that, but the thing that she's replaced it with, God, the sort of the kind of dynamic of the relationship she has is something a little bit similar to some of this millennial stuff. I don't know. Although admittedly, I guess social media doesn't quite make you do the things that Maud does. Or maybe it probably does, actually. Did you see Ingrid Goes West?
No.
With Aubrey Plaza. And she, it's all sort of, it's you know, tapping into quite similar stuff as Maud, but but it's sort of, she becomes obsessed with this Instagram influencer played by Elizabeth Olsen, and she sort of, you know, stalks her basically. But it's really amazing, but it's all quite I don't know, I think like the stuff that the characters are going through, it's all quite similar.
Oh wow, I must check it out. I really want to talk about, I mean, you know, Morveth is amazing and I have worked with her very, very briefly. But I also wanted to talk about Jennifer Healey's character, because I think she's so amazing in it, and it would be quite easy to overlook talking about her character, but I think it's one of the things that for me made the film so powerful, was the even-handedness of how she was shown and the complexity of her character. You know, that she wasn't just an invalid, she wasn't, you know, just old and dying. She, you know, you kind of gave her this kind of you know, she was a really complex and interesting character. How did you develop that character and get to that point with her?
To be honest, a lot of it is Jennifer, and that character kind of, I was the character, I think that character took shape quite quickly towards the end of development once we sort of knew that Jennifer was on board. It was because originally the character was meant to be kind of English and older, and I think I'd obviously been focusing a lot of attention trying to sort of get this Maud character right, and I was a bit worried that it could easily fall into exactly the things you're saying, of being a bit sort of tropey and sort of, or just existing as something.
Well, you could make her the baddie very easily, couldn't you? Yeah. Like, it would be very tempting to go, oh, she's this horrible old lady, she looks like a demon, let's get rid of her. And then the audience would not feel the same conflict potentially about, oh, just ditch her, she's really annoying.
But then I think maybe in the beginning I'd sort of had drafts where it was a bit more like that, but then it's sort of like, we've also got to understand why Maud, this kind of weird young woman, has such an obsession with her. And, you know, yes, it might be in reality that, you know, we can't always understand the reasons other people are obsessed with stuff, but as an audience, if we're empathizing with her, we need to sort of feel something. I don't know, but Jennifer is, yeah, both of them, but I think particularly considering what they were working with, what I gave them, I think Jennifer kind of made it a hell of a lot.
Yeah, I mean, she brought such a brilliant energy to it, like such a stillness, and it just, their chemistry was just worked really, really well in a way that I just don't think I really see many female relationships, dynamics on screen like that. It was just really interesting and
fun, because they're both very dry, and they can be very funny as well. So particularly sort of the two of them just sort of getting all the little kind of awkward misunderstandings between the two of them, I just found really fun to watch. And yeah, I mean, the film is very sort of over the top and kind of ridiculous in some ways. So the fact that they're both just as performers really sort of effortless and just managed to make all this really sort of silly sounding stuff sound incredibly natural. And yeah, and I think just, I don't know, just having someone like Jennifer in the role was, it just automatically, by having her being this sort of bit younger and, you know, being an American but sort of living in this weird little seaside town, it's kind of like, how did she get there? And there's this sort of immediately a bit more tragedy to her situation. And but I don't know, Jennifer's just,
I mean, I started thinking about, I'm sort of fascinated of representations of aging women, not just older women, which, you know, you categorize in a certain way, like, oh, that's not me, but actually aging women. So it's like, you know, the fact she has got this illness that is, you know, she's gradually deteriorating, and it's sort of a, I don't know, I mean, like, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I felt there was so much about the politics of the female body within there. And, you know, even if you're a young woman, you know, Maud literally tearing chunks off herself.
I mean, it's all stuff I was kind of like hoping would sort of come across a bit, but yeah, obviously by having her sort of as somebody whose whole profession and identity has sort of been built around her body and having a lot of sort of independence, I kind of imagined her the kind of person who's had, you know, quite in the middle of quite a successful, fulfilling life where she has like a huge amount of autonomy. And then sort of on the one, I don't know, both her and Maud are sort of trapped in different ways, but then obviously having her body deteriorating, and I don't know, just the sort of thing between her and Morphe as well is interesting, like because I guess on the one hand she's, you know, kind of successful, more confident, she's Maud's employer, but then at the same time just the sort of vulnerability of being a patient to somebody sort of in your own home seems must be so weird a shift. And then to sort of have this young woman who, it's like you have all of the kind of, you know, you have all this youth and you can do what you want, and like you said, she's just kind of like tearing chunks of herself. So I thought Jennifer brought a lot of I don't know, she's quite wry and a lot of sort of seething.
Well, it's weird, isn't it? Because it's almost like Maud is choosing to be old in a way. She's choosing death in a sense because of the torture that she's inflicting upon herself. But then I was taking it one step forward in my head and thinking, but is that what society does to women in a way? Is it like, you know, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't kind of thing?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I sort of wanted it to be a bit, at the beginning initially and on the surface, it's quite sort of obvious sort of opposites between the two, and the sort of like whore Madonna sort of thing. You have to be one or the other, and like you said, they're both kind of down. But then hopefully try and get it so that actually both characters sort of flip between being the sort of antagonist and protagonist, and sort of who we're afraid of and who we're afraid for and stuff, because it just seems more realistic, like what we were saying about earlier about everybody thinking they're the hero of their own story. I'm not saying that I think like what Amanda says about Maud, she, you know, she's kind of horrible to her in the party scene, but again, that's because she thinks that Maud's kind of gone on some weird homophobic rant and kind of told her, you know, girlfriend to fuck off. So fair enough. I'm saying that. But then obviously Maud thinks this. So yeah.
Yeah, it was so skillfully done that. It was so, I mean, what it made me feel like was, well, neither of them are evil really, but it felt like the world was evil. That's what I felt like. That's what scared me about it actually, and made me sort of haunted by it. Is I think I tweeted about it and I said it was a malevolent universe, and I think that's what it made me feel, was that everything around them was sentient and was wishing them ill basically. And it's funny because I'm really attracted to seaside towns as well as a filming location. It's just great. And I've seen, I feel like I've seen sort of like seaside towns done as dead, you know, I've seen that a lot. You do a beautiful shot of like a dead seaside town, but you made it look like it was seething. And that was what was fascinating about it. It was like this.
Oh, that's no. Because I kind of wanted, I think I was saying when I was talking to like Ben, the DOP, and Pauline, the designer, about sort of how to think about the locations. It was kind of like, think of like Amanda's house a bit of like as like this sort of kind of like weird Garden of Eden that's gone to seed, so it sort of has to be a bit mysterious, but kind of and obviously her bed sits kind of like her sort of hermit retreat. But then all of the town, I was just like, it's sort of just, I guess, Babylon kind of in more way. Even though like actually at the time we are filming it and what's actually going on out there, it is completely dead seaside, like off-season seaside town. There is no one around. Well, not many people around, but yeah, I kind of wanted it to be that the way she's seeing it, it's all very like heightened and
yeah, sort of decay and a lot of movement in it, which I love. And I think just your viewpoint, the way you made things seem fresh. But I was going to talk about some of your editing choices as well, because you're talking about like Amanda's bedroom, and I just love that way that I always felt like I never saw the whole house. I always felt like I saw slithers of the house and couldn't quite piece together its geography, because you're always seeing through a crack through the door, and so much of your editing choices, again, this very elliptical kind of editing choice, where sometimes you're cutting out of a scene really early so the audience feel like this really unsettling sort of thing. How did you find that style of editing? Where did that come from?
My editor's just going to be like, came from me. Yeah. Oh, yeah, kind of.
Not here now, so what can I do?
It's on me. No, I mean, I guess it's a combination of in the script, like I said, I was already trying to, you know, come out of scenes as early as you can, and then on top of that, having an editor whose style is incredibly kind of tight, so it seemed we tended to always look for like the quickest way out of a scene.
But it would always feel like Maud was about to do something else, and then you'd cut out of it, and it just...
Yeah, I kind of wanted it to be that you sort of, within every scene, there's sort of some kind of shape that you're sort of thinking, oh fuck, what's she going to do next? So basically, I think, oh yeah, at one point we were saying that basically every scene, when possible, needed to end with an oh fuck of some kind.
Yeah, but I mean, to me, it was like, it really was unsettling for a start, but it also made me think, you know, is this what it feels like to be in psychosis, this kind of time travel sort of thing? I mean, I was thinking of another film that I hadn't really thought for a while about, but it kind of reminded me of Donnie Darko in some ways as well. You know, this sort of this sense of the experience that you're inside is completely the fake narrative of this person's brain. Like, did any of it happen? Did all of it happen in 5 minutes, or did it happen over a month? And I think with mental illness, that you know, psychosis specifically, that can be the experience that time melts together, and even ordering becomes confused. Like, people think they can sort of tell the future because they're like, I knew that was going to happen, and you're like, well, no, you didn't, because
it's almost like
the order it happened in.
Well, I guess in a way, like maybe if you experience psychosis, like sort of your life sort of takes on a kind of like film-like narrative where everything kind of that you see and interact with has a meaning and a symbolism and something.
You're the lead in a story, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Everything's a clue. Yeah, I guess that was something I was like trying to sort of think a lot about, trying to pull off convincingly. Yeah, sometimes I just wish you could sort of edit your own life, I guess, of the bit of like just waiting for the next bit to happen. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think it just did it brilliantly, and all of the I mean, synchronicity is a big thing, I think, for people in psychosis, that as you say, clues. It's like clues from God, like I'm on the right trail, you know, this is the right thing that I'm doing. And you know, things like the whirlpool and stuff, and the whirling. And someone said to me, like, about the lighter, who is it? I was just like, a friend was like, what was with the lighter? And I was like, because I knew it was going to have some significance, because I was like, oh, more smoking, oh, another lighter. And then obviously, you know,
smoking while I was writing it, so just every scene it's just people like
oh really? So you were smoking when you were writing it?
Yes. That, yeah, constant process of like sort of stopping and starting. But in my head I'd figured maybe there used to be a lot more shots of cigarettes and lighters, like every time someone lit up there was going to be like a big sort of close up of it, obviously like not so subtly trying to foreshadow what happens at the end. So we kept some of it in. And I thought maybe Katie/Maud, maybe before she kind of found God and found this new persona, maybe she was a heavy smoker, and that was like one of the many things she kind of left in her past.
So every time she sees someone smoking, it's maybe triggering a sort of desire
exactly.
to go back to her sinful smoking ways.
Yeah. Which, yeah, and then the scene where Joy, the other nurse, comes into her flat at the end, someone points out to me that it's really rude that she just lights up a cigarette as soon as she gets in there. And I was like, well, if she thought that Katie Maud was like a heavy smoker before, then maybe it's not too rude.
They used to have ciggy breaks together, maybe outside work, and she's like, you don't mind, it still smells of it in here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, totally. That works for me. And yeah, I mean, it does still jar for people when they see people smoking on screen now, because like you don't see it very often. I mean, It's one of those things, isn't it, that people sort of bring up and you go, oh, does it really matter? She does light up. That's what she does. That's what the character does. And people get caught up on, yeah, but would she smoke in someone's house, someone else's house? You're like, well, she does. She does. It happened. We filmed it. That's the choice. So tell me about the design. I really loved all of the Art Deco design. You mentioned a little bit about it.
So yeah, that's basically Paulina Zhizhovska, our production designer, being brilliant. It was kind of her, well, no, she'd done one micro budget feature before, I think, but other than that, first film, and Ben, our DP, is his first film, composer Adam's his first film. But yeah, Paulina, she pretty much, we should have shot all of the interiors in these two houses in Highgate, but they were sort of completely empty, and aside from some of the wood paneling and the William Morris wallpaper going up the stairs, it was all just white walls and white floors and stuff. So she sort of created everything, which is amazing. And yeah, we had a lot of fun with Amanda's house and wanting it to sort of feel a bit like you step back in. Yeah, a lot of the film, I guess, feels a little bit like you step back in time, but sort of finding those ways to sort of bring it out a bit. And for everything sort of shadowy and seductive. And the Art Deco wallpaper actually had a bit above her bed. I remember Paulina, I'm going to do a terrible Polish accent now, but we were sort of getting a bit stuck on some stuff, it hadn't gotten into place, and then she got this wallpaper and she's like, when I find this wallpaper, everything falls into place. It unlocked the whole film. Yeah.
Sometimes it does. Sometimes stuff just falls into place like that, and you're like, oh, I get it now. I get what it is. Like, yeah, it would have been tempting to have it really run down, I suppose. You know, that would have been the cliche, to have her, you know, flock wallpaper and a really horrible house. But the fact that there is something seductive about her house, it's, you know, you're kind of like, oh, I quite like that wallpaper. I quite like that.
I thought maybe she had it as a kind of sort of lovely little hideaway. Maybe she sort of lived in America most of the time and then just sort of randomly has maybe inherited some weird old house that she escapes to, but is sort of done up to be a bit cooler. Yeah, it's tempting because like my personal taste is like, you know, I love old lady wallpaper and peeling stuff, but we're sort of reining some of it back a bit. It's sort of, I think I heard somebody say that the sort of zigzaggy wallpaper in Maud's bedroom is quite sort of anxiety inducing, just that kind of pattern. So we're trying to give each sort of place quite a clear identity, I guess. I think her bedsit's my favourite looking bit, actually. Yeah, like I said, I sort of wanted that to be a bit like a sort of religious hermit, or like a nun. Well, I keep thinking the wrong sort of words to describe what that means. Anyway, but yeah,
it's cell-like, I suppose, isn't it? Spartan. It's like one. It felt like one. I mean, so that was a real house that you found.
It was sort of these two like school. I think they belonged to a school. So I think maybe they used to be like boarding houses or something. And then before that, just old townhouses. So that basement was just like the basement of the house that we were otherwise using as like a canteen and kind of eating in. And it was good because like we only had Jennifer for about a couple of weeks. And so we shot all the stuff with them first in Amanda's lovely house. And it was all great. We got on really well. It was really fun. And then Jennifer had to go home, and then we sort of descended down into this like horrible little basement, which looks great but smelled awful. And then it was just like a few days of just more of it in her pants, like picking a scab on her hand. It was just a bit like, and everyone started to get ill. It was sort of that point in the shoots. We were shooting it in winter in 2018, so we're all just a bit kind of gross, but it was very fitting.
How much in order did you shoot it? Did you?
As much as we could. I mean, given that we sort of did everything in Amanda's house first, within that we tried as much as possible to do things chronologically. And then I think pretty much the very end of the film was like pretty much the last day of shooting, I think. And then obviously we did the pickups later on, but in the main shoot we sort of ended it on that, which is good. And hopefully I think more of it than Jennifer and more particularly sort of found that useful. Because yeah, it's a weird one, I guess, for actors. I don't know, like particularly, I know so often like just sort of directing actors filming, particularly in this house where it's sort of a lot of the scenes kind of are set in the same rooms, they're sort of wearing the same things, and you're sort of having to be like, oh, okay, so now there's just this huge sort of emotional thing that's happened, but then I don't know, sounds like a nightmare.
For a low budget film, it's really good to film in order, which sounds against what might be practical.
Yeah.
But I think if you have got very few locations, just to be able to have that feeling of like, right, this is their world, this is their everyday routine, this is their what they do on a day-to-day basis, to have that structure early, then you're almost building real memories for the cast, sort of thing. They're sort of like, oh, I remember when I was in your house and I was making you a cup of tea, because they did that scene first up, rather than doing it the reverse, like say shooting a random scene in a you know, disused fairground, which that's going to be first up, and it's not typical of what the characters do necessarily.
Yeah, I think the very first thing we filmed was just the first scene between Maud and Amanda, where she's just kind of poking her and giving her a checkup. So, and it was the first day of set, so everyone's a bit like, oh no. But it's sort of, I was like, oh, it works because it's meant to be a bit tense and awkward. So it was fun.
Well, I love that. I love the nervous tenseness. I mean, that was the other thing with like Prevenge, was it was a series of meetings of strangers. So we had no preparation time, and the actors didn't have any preparation time. You know, they'd been brought in last minute, and I was like, I love this, because any awkwardness you're getting on the screen, so any sort of actor's nerves of like, what are we doing, what's, you know, that tension, you're capturing that.
Because I didn't, so what, you sort of shot them just as little two-handers, as in you?
They're all two-handers. There's sandwichy bits in between, like what we were talking about, of like, you know, her in the hotel sort of thinking, but mainly each scene is a two-hander, which was the only way that I could conceive of doing such a low budget film, because I've sort of thought, well, if each two-hander is 10 minutes long and we do 8 of them, we've got a feature film basically. But it did mean people sort of coming in and being completely thrown in the deep end and not knowing, you know, like
I didn't really have rehearsal time or anything. It was just
no. I mean, no audition, no, you know. Sometimes you actually get to know the part by having to do a casting for it or a read through or something. So we didn't do anything like that. So people were literally coming in a bit like, what is this, you know? Like, and some of the actors even sort of said to me afterwards, like, God, it's quite good, you know, like that, you know, they were saying about the film, like they were amazed it worked out, kind of thing, because they felt so last minute. And
there's so many moments like the first scene where you go into sort of like the pet shop, and I was just you can sort of feel that weird tension so much. I wasn't sure like how much it was. I didn't know. Was it improvised as well, or was it all scripted and you just kind of did it on the day? Or
it was scripted, but then we improvised a little bit around the script. But actually, it's funny. It's not as improvised as you might think. Like I would say Sightseers has got more improvisation in it than Prevenge, because actually we had so little time. We actually had to do the script a lot of the time, because we just didn't have time. I'd be like, we'll do an improvised one, and then we just didn't get around to it. And like,
how long did you have to shoot it?
Sorry,
how long did you have to shoot it?
Well, the initial shoot was 8 days, and then we ended up doing 3 days pickup, basically.
Really?
But things like the pet shop, that was just, I mean, I'd written it as a pet shop. I was like, you know, as a reptile shop, it's going to be a reptile shop. And each of the killings, I'd got it in mind, like, oh, this killing is green, this killing is orange, this killing is blue. But I didn't think we would actually get that, you know, because we didn't have any art department budget really. So it was kind of what we got. And the locations person managed to find that pet shop which was green, and I was like, this is how I saw it in my head, that it would be green, and it was just like magical. And I was like, I mean, did you have any moments like that in St. Maud? That's a good one, where you thought like, God wants me to make this film?
Totally. And like it's really bad, because like particularly, I shouldn't be saying this, but like recently everything's just so weird, just on a global scale, so it's just feels very weird. It's kind of like, oh, I guess, I don't know, very weird. There was things like the saint costume that she wears was only meant to be a sort of dressing gown in the script, and then like at the last minute I'd suddenly gone, oh, I want something else, but I didn't know what. So I think Tina, my costume designer, we were both sort of freaking out a bit. And she's great. She kind of like, it was like the night before we were meant to shoot it or something, or a couple of days, and she threw this bed sheet that was on the set as a prop. She just threw that over a mannequin and was about to start trying to pin it into a little nightdress or something. But the way she'd thrown it, it just landed perfectly, like the sort of robe that Maud wears, and we were both like, oh.
And it's like it's like a painting of Jesus, that kind of, you know, swathing effect.
I didn't write that. That just kind of like, and then I saw it at the casting crew recently, and she was like, the spirits were with us that day.
But I wonder how much some of this stuff is embedded, because I mean, you're quite a bit younger than me, but I feel I still had quite a Christian upbringing in terms of through my school.
Yeah.
And so it's funny, however much I think that I'm not enthralled to a kind of Christian way of thinking, I am.
Yeah.
Because I read lots of Bible stories when I was a kid and they were read to me. I even like had a crush on Jesus when I was growing up, because we used to go to so many churches, because my mum was just like, she just liked churches, so she just wanted to go and look at them.
Yeah. I just like churches. I mean, I agreeing basically, like I, particularly after making this film and sort of starting to do interviews and stuff for it, weird, I've sort of found myself being like, I don't know, maybe there is something, like, I don't know. And whereas before at the start of it, I was kind of like, religion is ridiculous and blah, 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 being like very sort of proudly, arrogantly atheist kind of thing. And now I'm like, oh, who knows? Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of it definitely seeps in subconsciously, I guess, because I don't know, maybe so what, did you go to like Catholic school then?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think in quite a binary way in terms of good and bad, definitely.
Yeah.
I think it can be useful when you're writing stories, because at least you're sort of sure that there's some kind of rules about life and morality and everything, even if you then break those rules, if you see what I mean. But it's useful to sort of have them there. And that's what I felt about, St. Maud, that it was like, okay, it's playing around with some rules that a lot of people have internalized, and
I mean, I don't even know, I mean, maybe it does sort of come subconsciously from, religious upbringings, or maybe it's just sort of in culture, but what was I going to say? The thing of like all of us having weird little rules to live our lives by, and weird little sort of goals that we put, things that we set ourselves and give us, and the sort of bartering that you do with yourself about what you're going to permit yourself to do and not do. It's like, who are you talking to? Is that when you're sort of making those deals? And I think now I'm like, it's just a bit of yourself maybe, but, or you can call it God or whatever, but I don't know, I guess it just seems human, I guess, to be like, surely there's something behind all of this, like surely there's some kind of point. Or
do you think we're at a time where morality is like becoming less, in a, like, I don't want to sound all puritanical, I'm sounding like, to me there's like awful morality, which is sort of like homophobic and all these kind of prejudices which are related to Christianity and lots of other religions as well.
I'd say anything probably as a world where, I mean, obviously all these things exist in a terrible and not vanishing anytime soon, but probably on a global scale, they're probably far receded from any point in history that they've been, in terms of just because we're all so much more connected now. And I don't know, if anything, I don't know, I mean, this is all just me, like, I reckon, but it seems like if anything, people like as a whole are like more concerned with, I guess you just give yourself different things to weigh things by. So maybe the kind of like values, sort of moral values that people live by now, sort of Western society, by the same people's standards in like the 50s, I'm sure they'd be appalled with a lot of stuff that's going on, but it's still, there's a lot of progress. But I don't know, I'm sort of hopeful in that. But weirdly, the sort of morality side of it, like in a way, that's the part of religion that I sort of get the least in a way, or I kind of like, I don't know, the idea of feeling like there's some sort of bigger external force of some kind that we're a tiny cog in, that we don't sort of understand yet, because maybe we're not evolved enough to. I get that, but the idea of there being any kind of force that has any kind of like moral say or opinion or gives a shit about what you're doing, I think isn't. I disagree. I'm not sure what I'm saying. I'm just going from one now. But
well, I mean, I think I know what you're saying. I think when you're watching something like St. Maud, though, to me, it's an empathy. Who is it that called films an empathy machine? I think it might have been someone like Frank Cottrell Boyce said, films or books are empathy machines. So they're kind of,
I like that,
checking if you can identify with someone. And to me, that's the thing, if St. Maud as a news story would be mad woman murders poor invalid, who was dying of cancer, what an evil bitch. And then it'd be a Facebook picture of her dressed in a Halloween costume as a devil or something like that. And, those are the characters that I'm interested in, is like, how far can our empathy stretch? Like, how, we might not condone what she did, but we understand why she did it. You know, the film helped us to get to that point. Oh, but that's why she did it. There were these reasons that to her seemed reasonable. And I think that's the same with my character in Prevenge and the character I play in Sightseers as well. I'm sort of going, there is to me, that's would be my version of sort of religion, I suppose, is like humanity and being able to empathize with another human being.
Yeah.
Whereas when you try and put hard and fast rules on stuff, which is morality, the structure of religion, I suppose, that's like, no, that person was definitely wrong because they did that thing. That's the rule.
That's basically all the human stuff getting in the way of whatever the big sort of connecting thing's meant to be. I don't know. But yeah, I guess I mean, I'm feeling a bit sort of like grand or when I start saying stuff like this, but definitely like sort of writing the script, that was, you know, thinking of it, a hypothetical sort of thinking exercise of like how it would be on the news, like you're saying, was like exactly what I was kind of thinking. And yeah, it's, even if it wasn't about, oh, you know, crazy nurse murders thingy, but it's just crazy nurse kills herself on the beach, sets on fire, and it's you know, you kind of like, obviously we've become incredibly desensitized to things, so it's so easy to just kind of like read something quickly and dismiss someone, oh, they're just crazy or just this and that, or just a bad person fundamentally, and dismissing them is just a bit sort of, you can see why people do it, but it's a bit sort of dangerous and sort of lazy, this sort of idea that, oh, well, that could never happen to me, I would never do anything like that. And who knows what any of us would or wouldn't or could or couldn't do given the circumstances. And I don't know, I kind of feel like I've, you know, I'm sort of like very fortunate, privileged and stuff, and you know, I've sort of had sort of like struggles with mental health stuff in the past, but I've had like, you know, lovely family support, been fine, and stuff hasn't escalated. But it's so easy for that not to be the case, you know, even with all those things. And yeah, I don't know, I was kind of writing the film just sort of thinking about, sort of realizing how, I don't know, sometimes I just think it's miraculous that we aren't all just kind of going around kind of killing each other, or, well, we're not killing each other, but you know, the line between, well, just the sort of weird social contract of all of us just kind of walking around and kind of getting on with stuff and not just going, what the fuck's going on? Like, it's just, and I don't know, that's it. Yeah,
contract, that's such an interesting term, and that was a lot of the Prevenge thing as well, is like social contracts. Why, you know, why do we have this social contract that we're supposed to be nice to people with children? You know, all these kind of things that we don't really question.
Yeah.
But then my fear is that all going to change? Are we at a point in time where people are going to stop giving a shit about others? Well, times are hard, so we're not going to give free school meals now because, you know.
I mean,
I don't know.
No, oh, maybe you're right.
That's a depressing note to end on, isn't it, for Halloween? You know, so
and take different whatever. Children are always going to be important to lots of people, so regardless of them, even if,
well, you hope, don't you? That's the kind of it's what people's cut-off points is, isn't it? Really, of like where their empathy runs out, and they go, "Oh no,
yeah.
I've given."
It all comes down to the circumstance, and everybody thinking that they're a hero of their own story. It's like on the surface, like, do you like children? Like, are you a good person? Like, yes, of course I do. Yes, children are lovely. Okay, but now we're going to do this. Do you still like them? It's like, yeah. At what point? How long do people continue giving a shit when it's not in their own interests?
Well, I mean, for me, it was like, I just felt that the film had a really responsible take on mental illness as well. And even though it is horror and it is genre, to me, it was a kind of more realistic take of mental illness than one had seen, really. I think because of a lot of the editing choices and the way you were immersed in her world, I just felt like it was removed enough from reality to not be insensitive, you know, like, and almost it being heightened into a genre piece made it more palatable in a way. Like if it was actually just a straight drama with no supernatural stuff in it, you know, I think that might be actually more horrifying in a way.
Totally. I mean, that was sort of the thing early on. I sort of had to keep like convincing and reminding like development people and financiers that like it is going to be like fun, sort of genre skewed as well. It's not going to be like a bleak social realism kind of thing, because yeah, it would just be too sad. I mean, I think it's a more fun way to tell it, but also like again I'm glad you think that, because I guess that was the intention of doing it. It's even if it's less realistic depiction in some ways. It's more realistic to how the character sees themselves. Like she sees herself as like as a hero of, you know, lead story of a
yeah, her life is fun. If she's experiencing mania, she's having a great time. I mean, there's moments of awe and horror for her, but
yeah, totally.
but she's living her best life.
Well, that's why I had the like, you know, the when God sort of touches her or whatever, and she has these kind of weird orgasmic kind of moments. It's trying to be like, okay, well, even if you don't believe in God, or you don't kind of, or you don't quite get it, like, you know, orgasms are great, you know, whatever, you can identify with that kind of feeling, and it's, you know, we had to sort of get why she is pushed to keep doing the things she does, and why she keeps choosing that path over, say, I don't know, reaching out or just something
or medication else, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of the bargain that people make when they are experiencing mania or whatever. I think there was a lot of high profile stuff about Kanye West not wanting to take medication, because actually when you're in mania it's great, and you don't want it to stop. Like everyone else is going, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But you're like having a brilliant time, so you're like, why would I want that to stop?
Real life is messy.
To God, you know.
And like, real life's messy and boring and confusing and all these other kind of things. So if you kind of find yourself in a situation where suddenly everything has meaning and you've got real focus and purpose and are incredibly important and doing great things, it's like we can all get on board with that.
Yeah. Well, it's an amazing film. I think we've probably gone over the time that we're supposed to talk for, but I could talk for hours about it because I loved it so much. But people should definitely get out and see it while it's still in the cinema, because it's such a cinematic experience. But meanwhile, do you know when is it going to be out to watch?
As long as they'll have us, I guess. I don't know when that'll be, but if you can go and see it, hopefully enjoy it. And I'm really glad you enjoyed it. It's great. It's really cool to see. Cool.
I think we could just
Good night, everybody. Lovely.
Yeah. Happy Halloween.
All right. Oh yeah. Happy Halloween.